This is TechSNAP, episode 412, for September 20th, 2019. Hello and welcome to TechSNAP, Jupiter Broadcasting Systems, Network, and Administration podcast. My name is Wes, and I'm pleased to be joined once again by Jim.
What's up, Wes?
Well, Jim, we've got a great show today. Why don't we start it off with a little gadget you've been telling me about?
Surefi. Yeah, this whole Surefi thing is pretty cool. I got this weird email, unsolicited email from a guy at a PR firm, and he was saying that he had this device that would transmit over 50 miles or, 1 mile of heavy obstructions, and, he wanted me to, this is a direct quote here, take the Wi-Fi challenge. Pretty much pegged my WTF meter. When you peg the WTF meter, I got to find out what you're on about. So, I told the guy I'm cautiously interested, and he got me in touch with the company's president and founder, who seemed about as flummoxed as I was. And he's like, yeah, we don't say Wi-Fi channel. This isn't a replacement for consumer Wi-Fi. It's low bandwidth, 900 megahertz. It's, for use with industrial controllers. They just need to do a little telemetry and control stuff.
That's different.
It is different. And, we got at this like the worst possible way, because I'm asking what's the interface on this? Like, how do I hook it up to my laptop? Yada, yada, yada. And what it actually boils down to is they have this little test device they'll send you so you can play with it and see if it'll, work in your environment. And it's just a couple of, like little handheld boxes with a button and some LEDs on it. And when you press the button on either one of them, it will communicate with the other one, and they will both light up with, from 0 to 6 LEDs to tell you, what signal strength they're seeing. As long as you got one or more LEDs, you're good to go. Okay, it's not a Wi-Fi replacement, obviously. Turns out the actual bandwidth is, usually about 300 bits per second.
Say that again, 300 bits?
300 bits per second. 300 baud, like my old external modem in 1986, which was not, high-end gear even then. Even back then, 2400 baud was what you wanted to have. But you don't want to browse the internet over this thing, obviously. It would take you,
right,
about an hour and a half to download the front page of Ars Technica without any of the graphics in it.
But it might work just great for, as you say, like monitoring or just trying to control some piece of equipment.
Yeah, if you do the math, 300 bits per second is about the equivalent of a 225 word per minute typist. So you can definitely get some data moved.
I'd say.
Yeah, as long as you're just looking for the data, bare bones, you're not trying to sling JPEGs, let alone video or anything like that. But if you want to be like, hey, what's the reading on these meters? And I want you to open relay number 3, works great for that.
How'd they do? How'd they perform? And how did you actually go about testing them?
So they actually did fantastic. I broke open the kit and checked the batteries and turned these things on. And the first thing that the PR guy had suggested to me, when he's giving me this wild pitch that confused his client as much as it did me, he's saying, you can put one of these things in the microwave and close the door, and they'll communicate with it just fine. I'm like, all right, well, let's give that a shot. Because that's the closest thing to a Faraday cage most people have got in their house.
Right. Microwaves are designed to try to block the radiation being used to cook the food.
Yeah, so I stick one of these things in the microwave and close the door, and I'm looking at the one in the microwave, and I press the button on the one that I'm holding in my hand, and 6 bars, full strength, like the microwave just wasn't even there at all. And I'm like, okay, you got my attention now. Like, I figured to expect, okay, it's definitely going to communicate, through the microwave, but I was not expecting just full strength, like there's nothing at all in the way.
Yeah, microwave? Who cares?
Yeah, so my next step is, anybody who's read any of my Wi-Fi test articles is probably familiar by now with the fact that, my office is just an absolute horrible dungeon to try to get Wi-Fi to, because, it's cut off from the rest of the house by, like 20 feet of dirt, because, I've got like a half floor partial basement where my office is. And, that is featured in like all of my Wi-Fi testing, because, it's one of your challenges. Like, can you get around that? And the answer is, if it's a single router, no, you can't. But, if it's mesh, then you need to be able to manage that one way or the other.
I like that. It's like a real world test case, because it is your real home.
Exactly. So, with Wi-Fi mesh, you can get around it a couple of ways. The simplest way is, as long as you just got two devices and you can put one in, the router closet where the internet comes in and one in, like the living room, dining room area, which is actually directly above, the bottom floor. You say, okay, well, we can relay to the satellite that's above the bottom floor and get a pretty decent Wi-Fi signal through the floor. The other option, if you've got a kit with 3 or more units, if they'll do a good tree topology, not just star topology, then in theory you can relay from the router to one on the top floor and then down through the floor to an actual node on the bottom floor. And assuming you've got a kit that works well in a tree topology, which most of them don't, that's going to be, it's typically your best configuration. It'll give you the lowest latency, even if it doesn't give you the highest possible throughput. And that's usually what you're shooting for. But my next step with the Surefly was to go downstairs, and I put one in the office, and I ran back upstairs and up to the router closet, and I pressed the button. And again, it's just like 6 bars. It is unimpressed with my difficult house to cover. So I'm like, okay. Now we're going to take this thing seriously. And I go back downstairs. So my office is it's where we're casting. It's where I'm casting this pod from right now. And I've got a nice Logitech webcam that's mounted on my monitor. But this thing, it's not like an eyeball cam, right? It's like clipped to the top of the monitor. You can't really like pan or zoom it. It's just facing at face level. So I'm like, all right, I know my plan. I want to get one of these things in the field of the webcam. I'm going to set up, a video meeting in Google Hangouts with like my Ars Technica address connected and my personal address connected, so that I can see this thing elsewhere and make sure that both boxes light up the same, right?
Oh, yeah. You got like your little nanny cam going, but on your test equipment.
Yeah. So I end up just taking like a little cloth glasses bag, like you put, sunglasses in or something. And I shove one of these things in that. And then I actually hang the drawstring of this thing off of the big studio mic that I'm using to podcast right now.
I'll pretend I didn't hear that.
Yeah. That gets it visible for the camera. So like now I'm set up and I do a quick, test press, and yeah, these, the LEDs are super bright. I can see them through the bag just fine. So I'm like, all right, sweet. I go get in the car, and I drive about a half a mile away out to the main highway. And now, again, the one end of this thing, it's down in the basement, right? And my house is about like a third of the way down a pretty big hill. And to get out to the main highway, you have to go over the crest of the hill and back down again. So like I've passed the crest of this hill. And so I'm going through like the hill and down to the basement of my house, half a mile away, houses, all kinds of buildings, whatever in the way. And I hit the button and I got 3 bars, man.
Oh,
it's solid. So
yeah,
my next step, and I drove around more, and I got out of range of it, and I'm watching like in my phone where I've got my little Google meeting going, so I can watch and see.
You're checking up on it back at the office.
Yeah, because I'm paranoid. I'm like, I don't want to get like tricked by something like they've got it rigged up.
Right, if it's just yours is lighting up, but the other one isn't.
Yeah, and so no, I mean they're clearly communicating because they always agree in real time. They light up the same number of things, and I get out of range, which is not much farther away than that half mile, with all that dirt in the way too.
Sure.
And once I get the rest of the way out of range, get a little bit more hill in between, it does not light up at all. It's like no, I can't contact the other one. But so at this point, like I'm like, all right, this is pretty cool.
Also, by the way, that's a pretty cute image. I'm just imagining you driving around madly pushing the button on this thing, checking back in at home.
Right, looking down at my phone, like sitting on the passenger seat, just glancing down, like making sure that the lights match. Yeah.
Yeah.
So anyway, I'm like, okay, so that's really cool, but I want to check it out in like a little bit more open kind of terrain where I'm not literally like punching through a freaking hill. And my mom's house is about 35 miles away in a really rural area. And it's just, it's nothing but, like a mile or so of woods all the way around the house, right?
Sounds lovely, by the way.
Oh, it is, man. It's awesome. I head out there and I put one of these things in the living room of her house, and I drive around the back roads to this little church that is just under a mile away as the crow flies. and it's going through. I mean, it's heavy wooded terrain the whole way, almost a mile from this church to the house. And again, this thing at the house, like, I mean, it's not like out in the yard. It's not sitting on the roof. It's in the freaking house, right? It's probably going through their metal storage shed with a tractor in it as well, from the general angle that I'm at. And yeah, I get 2 bars there. Almost a mile away, through heavy terrain.
Yeah, it's it's impressive. Obviously, you have to have the right use case for it, but it takes a good amount of science and physics at play here, and then a lot of engineering to make something that's going to be that robust in the real world.
Yeah, so the way these things work is it's, if you've ever, I don't know, if any of you folks out there are military technology buffs, you've probably at least heard something about, RF chirp technology. Basically, it's a widespread spectrum, and these things will try to, they'll try to route around, any kind of jamming. They'll find a frequency in their overall range that works, and they don't only use one frequency. Like, it hops around. It's very, very difficult to jam, and it's not high bandwidth. Here we're only talking about like 300 bits per second, but also, we're talking about 900 megahertz that will go through, 100 feet of dirt. So I tested this thing, at this one client where I'd had that, long running war. And so for there, they've got a mechanical room downstairs. It's about 20 feet underground in a main building. And then over in another building where the HVAC unit itself is, the HVAC unit is about 8 feet underground. And I measured the distance between the two with Google Maps and came out with it's about 104 feet in between the two locations through packed earth. And 2 bars, 104 feet, packed dirt, 2 bars.
Right. I mean, think about that. There's a lot of applications. If you've got a non-ideal workspace situation where you just need signal, you don't have a whole lot of money to spend on retrofitting or digging through a whole bunch of dirt to get a connection across.
Or just, I mean, even then eventually, I mean, right now it's probably too expensive for that, but eventually in the consumer space, imagine like all of this, low bandwidth IoT garbage that's, junking up your Wi-Fi right now and eating up all this airtime, doing next to nothing. Instead, those things could just be, chirping to each other and not messing up your Wi-Fi at all.
Well, that's certainly a world I hope we live in sometime soon.
All right, Wes, so as long as we're talking about wireless and RF, this and that and the other, did you see that the Wi-Fi Alliance has opened up their Wi-Fi 6 certification program?
Wait, Wi-Fi 6? Did we have Wi-Fi 5?
Yeah, we did. Wi-Fi 5 was 802.11ac, Wi-Fi 4 was 802.11n, Wi-Fi 6 is 802.11ax, and 802.11ay just doesn't get a Wi-Fi number because F you, that's why.
Okay, so we've both got like some new tech here, a new protocol, and a new naming scheme to boot.
Yeah, and everybody's just going to have to get used to it. They really, really want everybody to say Wi-Fi 5 and Wi-Fi 6 now, and that's going to be what's on all the boxes, and pretty soon it's just going to be us engineer types that say things like 802.11ax. So anyway, where we're actually at with this thing, if you remember when 802.11n came out in particular, we had like a year of seeing 802.11n draft devices come out.
I think I may have bought one of those back then.
Yeah, exactly. And then, about a year after that, you start seeing, actual 802.11n certified. So that's where we're at with Wi-Fi 6 right now. A lot of people have released routers and access points and what have you that were Wi-Fi 6-ish, but like technically those are all Wi-Fi 6 draft. The certification program from the Wi-Fi Alliance, basically to use their branding and say you have a Wi-Fi 6 certified device, you have to put your device through their testing program, whatever that happens to be, and then you're allowed to say that on the box. Now, I think the thing that's most worth noting about this is that since we're in that stage of the deployment now, that means that consumers are going to start and should start, actually looking for Wi-Fi 6 capability on new devices they purchase.
Ah, right. Like this is actually going to be rolled out now that you can get the stamp and look official.
Yeah, absolutely. And, the other thing about that, some advice I want to give everybody, don't go rushing out like just dying to buy a Wi-Fi 6 router or access point right now. That's not what you need to buy first. Buy the devices first. Like, if you're up for a new phone, try to make sure that your new phone has Wi-Fi 6 capability. Like, Samsung's Galaxy 10 and the iPhone 11 and Google Pixel 4, you should start at this point saying, okay, if the thing that I buy isn't Wi-Fi 6, I should be making sure I get a really good deal on that, because that's going to bite me in a couple of years. It's not really time to buy the router or the access points or the mesh kit that are Wi-Fi 6 until you've got at least 3 or 4 of those devices that you use all the time in your house, because the biggest benefits from the upgrade are going to come in, less congestion when you have a lot of devices online. So it's more expensive to buy a Wi-Fi 6 router or access point right now.
Right, they're brand new.
And the other thing about that is, there's so much variability in like what's a good router and what's a good access point. And spending more money doesn't always get you the better thing.
It's hard to tell right now if people haven't really been using the ones that are freshly out.
Exactly. And there's so few of them out there, and they're expensive. So I'm about to step up my Wi-Fi 6, router testing game and just spamming out a ton of those things, testing everything I can get my hands on. But right now, you shouldn't be rushing to buy one of those unless you're just really in the market. And as I'm testing those to begin with, most of my testing is going to be focused on how well they work with existing devices, because, for the next year or two, that's what most of us are going to have. We're going to have a whole bunch of 802.11ac, Wi-Fi 5 devices, and maybe 1 or 2 Wi-Fi 6. And that's the way you do that. Upgrade the devices first, then upgrade the router later when it gets cheap and when you've got the devices to take advantage of it.
Right, it's a rolling upgrade, and I don't know about you, Jim, but I can't afford to go replace every last piece of electronics in my house each time we have a new protocol out there.
No, definitely not. But have your eye out when you buy a new laptop, when you buy a new phone, when you buy a new whatever. Try and score one that's got Wi-Fi 6.
Right, I see you note in your coverage over at ours that laptops with the latest generation of Intel chips have it baked right in.
Yeah, correct. If you get either Ice Lake or Comet Lake Intel, you will absolutely have Wi-Fi 6 because it's baked right into the CPU. There are a few other chipsets out there to get Wi-Fi 6, but for right now in the laptop world, I think the Intel stuff is about all that you're going to see in the real world. It will be interesting to see whether that is baked into AMD's next generation of mobile Ryzens or not.
We will just have to wait and see on that one, I think. With Wi-Fi 6, we're also finally getting a security upgrade, right?
Yep. WPA3 is mandatory for Wi-Fi 6. Unfortunately, they watered down a lot of the WPA3 requirements, but it is still definitely a significant upgrade over WPA2. And you will have to have that support built into your device, whether you're talking about a phone or a laptop or the router itself with Wi-Fi 6. So an upgrade's an upgrade, right?
Yeah, and after I've just spent all that money replacing all of my gear, I don't want the neighbors to be stealing my super fast internet. Well, one of those fancy new devices is the yet-to-be-released Pixel 4, and as usual, Jim, there have been a ton of leaks.
Yeah, I don't know if you can really call those leaks. I refuse to believe that Google is so incompetent that with literally every single flagship phone release, oops, we accidentally let somebody take it into a bar and just leave it around for somebody to pick up. That's not a leak. That's
PR.
That's just their weird PR campaign. Yeah. On the one hand, I'm kind of excited about the Pixel 4 because the cameras just keep getting better and better, and I was already blown away by how good the camera was in my Pixel 2 XL, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I've certainly been enjoying the camera on my Pixel 3.
Right, and I'm looking forward to the Wi-Fi 6 support, and a faster processor is always nice. But the one thing that I look forward to the added capabilities of the new camera with the multiple lenses and the yada yada yada. But man, that thing is just uglier than a homemade sin. That little square excrescence that sticks out of the upper left corner of the back of the phone so far that, in a non-text pic of the, Pixel 4 from the, quote, leaked, unquote, unit that the Vietnamese YouTubers had, that camera bulge sticks out so far, that little black square, you can see it casting a shadow on the phone. And I'm just like, you've got to have a case for that thing, man, because that's just not going to be okay.
It seems we're in for that, as the latest iPhones, well, they've got something similar.
Yeah, they really do. To start out with, I really wanted to blast Google over, making this huge, ugly block camera thing stick out of the phone. I'm like, just look over there at the iPhone 11, man. Yeah, everybody jokes about it looking like a Remington shaver, the War of the Worlds with, these big round camera lenses, sticking out of it. But, it's smooth. It's sleek because, I've been seeing all of Apple's promo photos of these things. I watched the entire product launch. I thought I'd seen these things from all angles. And I thought, yeah, it's a little weird because it's got all these big round lenses, but it's smooth. It's sleek. It's not. Over at ours, we covered the iPhone 11 and, the pic at the top of our article over there, you can see, again, it's those big three lenses everybody's seen. They are actually mounted in a little square block up on the upper left of the phone. And again, it sticks out far enough to cast a shadow. Wes, as long as we're picking on the iPhone, you know how I love to pick on iPhones.
I do.
There's one other thing I want to say about that product launch. Well, actually, there's two other things I want to say about that product launch. One is that Apple made a big deal out of the fact that they have added slow motion video to the capability of the front camera on the phone.
You mean slow fees, Jim?
I mean slow fees. God help us all. The other thing that got me in that product launch and really just had me questioning my life decisions that I was watching 2 hours of this, the guy that is presenting the iPhone 11 Pro and its amazing video taking capabilities. And don't get me wrong, I don't know how much a normal average everyday person is going to be able to do with the camera. They're obviously using, world-class videographers to take these demo videos with these phones. But I will say it's pretty impressive. They can take, what looks like $100,000, New York City ad agency, advertisement. They can shoot that from an iPhone. Whoever they had to get to do it, that's pretty impressive. Credit where credit's due. But towards the end of this piece where, this guy is pushing the video taking capabilities, he starts gushing about if you open up the camera app, you'll see that they've laid out the controls inside the app with a new font called F5. And then he says, and this is a direct quote, "It's so pro, you're going to love it." It's so pro.
Hey, I mean, I love me a good font, but that's a bit over the top.
It's so pro, Wes.
Well, speaking of Google devices there, Jim, you shared a bit of information with me about Chromebooks that, despite having recently talked about them over on Linux Unplugged, I was a bit surprised to learn.
You got to be talking about the expiration date, Wes.
Yeah, that's the one.
Yeah, that one blew my mind too. We had a little bit of Google news that I covered over at ours, and so the Google folks wanted to push out a notification that you were, approaching the end of life of your device and it would no longer get security updates. They wanted you to get that notice a little bit quicker. So they pushed a code to the dev and the canary builds of Chrome OS that would, in theory, give you like a 6-month notification rather than just telling you you're no longer getting security updates. It would let you know this is going to happen in 6 months. You should start planning. There was a bug in the code, though, and what actually ended up happening is every single Chromebook that got that code notified its user 6 months from now, you're going to stop getting updates. Now, the good news was this was only in the dev and the canary build.
People who've probably opted in to that sort of thing.
Exactly. If you know anything about Chrome OS builds, it ranges from stable through beta through developer to canary. So, we're talking about not even beta. We're talking about alpha code. The folks that got these messages were in the best possible position to deal with it. It did not reach the general population. But so the interesting thing to me reporting on this is, wait a minute, Chromebooks have an expiration date? And yep, Chromebooks have an expiration date. If you have a Chrome OS device, 6.5 years from the date that the motherboard that device is based on was certified, it's going to stop getting security updates. And the pop-up that comes up to warn you about this tells you, you're going to need to replace this device because it's received its last update.
Yikes. Okay. And as you said there, but maybe not super noticeable, it's not when you bought the device. It's when that product line was launched.
Correct. And, it's not even when the product line is launched. It's when that motherboard's certified. Like once that motherboard got entered in, because you have to understand the way Google does the updates on the Chromebooks, it's not like a normal laptop. The builds for Chrome OS on Chromebooks and Chrome boxes and all these Chrome OS devices, it's more like a phone OS build, The drivers are very specifically tailored to that exact set of hardware.
All customized for that thing.
Yeah, you can't load an update that was you can't load a Chrome OS build that was intended for an Acer C720 onto like a Samsung Chromebook 4. They're completely separate. I would assume that's part of the reason why Google felt they needed to, end updates for these things is because they're only expected to have like a phone-like life cycle, and each one of them is really more of like a separate thing you have to deal with than you would see with, a more mainstream operating system like Windows or Linux.
Now, what do you think about the argument that there's got to be some life cycle, right? At some point, the device's usability decreases, and from the Google side, well, it costs money to provide security updates, and surely they can't do it forever, so there's got to be some end date, right?
I think the answer there is the only reason that Google can't do it forever is because they've decided to, make these crazy microscopically tailored, builds for each hardware design. Had they chosen to do, a more universal operating system installation that, could just load whatever drivers it needed to, like a mainstream Linux distribution, it really wouldn't be a big deal to support all this stuff for longer because, you'd just be getting your regular Chrome OS updates to your regular Chrome OS installation. As a matter of fact, you can do exactly that. You just can't do it with Chrome OS. If you don't know already, Chrome OS is actually a derivation of Chromium OS. Chromium OS is completely free and open source. Chrome OS is a proprietary build built on top of that. Now, there are some other providers of Chromium OS distributions. You can either install Chromium OS completely native. I've seen that done on laptops in the wild. There's also an outfit called Neverware that makes a Chromium OS distribution called Cloud Ready. And you can load Cloud Ready on your Chromebook that has, passed its expiration date, and it will work just fine. And it will look and feel and work, for the most part, just like it did when it was a Chrome OS device. You also, of course, have the option of saying the heck with all this Chrome OS stuff completely, and I'm just going to install Linux on it and use it as a Linux box. And that works fine.
Yeah, really, that seems like something to pay attention to if, you're a consumer interested in that sort of thing, or maybe you're a sysadmin somewhere and you've got a fleet of Chromebooks. Important to think about just how long those might be useful.
Most of us, we're not buying expensive Chromebook hardware. I've bought Acer C720s and, the Samsung low-end Chromebooks. They're 11-inch devices. They cost, $200 or slightly less, brand new. 6.5 years out of an entire laptop you bought for $200 new, that's really not a bad lifespan at all. And it's questionable how many more years you're going to get out of something that was a bottom of the barrel Celeron build, from 6.5 years ago.
Right.
So it's always been kind of pants on head crazy to me that Google is trying to convince people to invest in, these Pixel books, these really expensive Chromebooks that have, Intel Core processors and more RAM and a larger hard drive. I'm like, it's still freaking Chrome OS, man. It's just a browser in a box. What's the point in a 128 gig solid state drive when everything's getting saved on a Google Drive anyway? Why do I need the core CPU when honestly that bottom of the barrel Celeron, it works great for doing anything that you really can realistically do on a Chromebook in my experience, because you're just running stuff in the browser. I already thought that was kind of nuts, but now you really want to look at this. Okay, so it's one thing to say that your $200 Celeron machine, is no longer going to be supported in 6.5 years from when the motherboard was certified, which already may mean only in 5 years from when it was even available to buy, right?
Yeah.
The Pixel book has been out for a year now. It's still $1,000 at Best Buy. Now you're telling me I can't use my $1,000 laptop in 5 or 6 years because, we're just going to EOL it and you can't have any updates for it. I'm like, you got to be kidding me. Now that's a problem.
Right. I mean, if you weren't already just going to use it to put Linux on, it's about, well, you'd be able to use it for it at that point. And that's probably not what you wanted.
And honestly, if you're going to spend $1,000 on a Linux laptop, you can do better than that.
There are other options.
There really are. There really are.
Back in episode 403, you and I talked a bit about quantum key distribution. Sounds like there's a little bit of an update, or at least maybe?
Kind of yeah and kind of no. So quantum key distribution is this really interesting technology where you have basically dark fiber from point A to point B, and you move just your key over this point-to-point fiber link, not the actual data. And the thing that makes this secure, it makes it a good way to exchange static keys, is that you're not transmitting it in, the normal digital sense where it's like, okay, we send a pulse of light and then no light and then a pulse of light, and you put those pulses together to come up with your zeros and ones for binary, and that's your data, right?
Right. Classical digital communication.
Classical digital communications, but your kind of waterfall here is you go from analog and then you go to digital. Well, the next step up is quantum. Now, quantum key distribution, you've still got that fiber link from point A to point B, but your data isn't encoded in pulses of light. It's actually encoded in the spin of individual photons going down the cable. And what makes this special is that if you try to tap that cable in any way, anything that you do in the midst of the cable, you try to tap it, you try to put a Y on it, you try to interact, even if you bend the cable too far, you'll have changed the characteristics of that cable, the way that it interacts with the photons, and they won't have the right spin on them anymore when they get to the other end.
Right.
So not only do you not have the data as, Charlie in this whole, classical Alice, Bob, Charlie. Alice and Bob want to communicate, and Charlie tries to get in the middle of it.
Sneaky Charlie.
Not only is Charlie unable to get any useful information out of tapping the middle of that cable because the spin of the photons isn't right yet at that part of the cable. It has to be, it's not going to be right until the very end of it. He's also going to make it very obvious that he's tried to do something because now the spin's not going to be correct over on Bob's end either. And so everybody knows, okay, this is no longer trustworthy. We're not getting any data through it. We're not getting any data out of it. We need to figure out what went wrong and repair it.
Right, you're leveraging quantum physics properties of the system to securely transmit that cryptographic information.
Absolutely. I mean, in a way, you can think of the physical properties of that, 50, 100 kilometer length of cable. You can think of the physical properties of that cable as, in a way, they're like a key in and of themselves. Because if you replace that cable, if you alter that cable, the data no longer works anymore. It's effectively encrypted with a key that you don't have. Now, the problem with all this is that there's a limit to the length of cable that you can successfully transmit, this quantum data over. Once you get over, I think it's like 150 kilometers is the absolute top end limit of how long you can have one of these links. You can no longer predict the spin of the photons on the other end well enough to be able to usefully send any data across it. So this is kind of the big Achilles heel for doing quantum key distribution, is you can't do it over distance greater than that. Now, these same folks that I talked to back in May, Quantum Exchange, they have come up with a new technology that they say will eliminate this distance limitation. Unfortunately, it's not quantum key distribution at all.
Well, if it's not quantum key distribution, what is this other technology?
So the other technology, it boils down to a really high quality source of entropy to use for generating random data. And then it revolves around the concept of you use this high-quality source of entropy. And I believe that source is itself quantum, but it really doesn't matter because what you're getting out of it is entropy, just like any other kind of entropy. It's just really high quality, unlikely to have repeating patterns. So you generate a key from this high-quality entropy source, and then you transmit it not over the same data connection as the actual data itself. You transmit it by a different route. That might be, a traditional point-to-point link. It might just be a different internet provider. Maybe it's a laser link. Who knows? It doesn't really matter. The point is just that your key and the actual data that it encrypts are never transmitted over the same physical layer.
So we no longer have a special quantum link, but we're following back on a different classical scheme to try to retain some security benefits. Am I getting this right?
Classical scheme indeed, Wes. They're basically splitting up the keg and the tap.
That's it for today's episode, but don't worry, you can find more TechSNAP over at techsnap.systems. You can also find easy ways to get in touch or subscribe to the show. And make sure to check out our new show, Linux Headlines. It's Linux and open source headlines every weekday in 3 minutes or less. Of course, you can find all the other fine Jupiter Broadcasting productions over at jupiterbroadcasting.com. If you'd like more Jim, well, go find him writing over at ours, or find him on Twitter. Jim, you're
at JRSSNet.
I'm there too. I'm at Wes Payne, and the network is at Jupiter Signal. Thank you all for joining us.
See you in a couple weeks, everybody.